Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in here again. So this is a more typical kind of video for me. It'll be shorter for one thing, but also just a capture of my screen, which is kind of what your screen is going to look like too, save for a few little differences. There's subtle differences between the instructor view of things and the student view of things, but nothing major. So I'm recording this on Thursday morning. And as always, you'd want to, look at announcement material, which is what you're doing now if you're watching this. And then, let's see, always check into the due dates to see where we're at. Thursday is our first due date, so you've done everything in Unit 1 by the end of the day on Thursday. And so again, Unit 1 is a good example of a unit where there's actually a couple of things going on. So you may get into the home page and complete that and think, okay, I've done Unit 1, but you always want to make sure that you've actually completed everything in Unit 1, including this brief little ungraded survey. I like to, get people's sense of what they're embarking on through this little form that you can fill out. So there's the home page you're doing, the discussion board. Remember that discussion boards almost always have a respond component to them. Sometimes it's respond to 1, sometimes 2. It kind of depends on what else we're doing in that unit. So don't do just like half the unit and think that you're finished. Make sure you get through all of it. Also remember that within the orientation there's a little quiz to do. So that's kind of part of Unit 1 as well. It's not really in Unit 1 exactly, but that'll be due by the same due date, Unit 1 due date. And then, of course, you can always check your grades as you keep going. This is a link that won't actually work for me because of my instructor view here, but you'll see, everything that we're doing, not just the points that you're getting, but maybe brief comments or feedback or questions or whatever that I might have put in there as well. So in addition to the number, make sure that you're looking for those comments. Most of the stuff that we do early on is relatively kind of minor point value things. And especially for discussion boards, there's a discussion of discussion board grading within the grading guidelines here. But for the most part, you'll get maximum full points is kind of reserved for really, really not just well written, but like really well developed posts and responses. If you maybe are slightly less developed than that, then you'll probably get very close to full points, but not totally full points. And then if there's pieces missing, like you forget the reply, or maybe you do something wrong in one of the later ones, that's when the point value actually goes down significantly. But always keep in mind that if something is out of, let's say, 25 or 50 points and you get like 45 out of 50, it's still an A if you did the math. And remember that those 5 points, it's out of 1,000 in the whole course. So you don't really need to concern yourself with those nickel and dime type things, or you don't need to worry so much about them. Obviously the points matter much more when we get to those essays a little bit later in our course, so always keep things in perspective that way. Another good example is if it's like you get a 40 out of a 50 on a discussion board. Maybe you just didn't develop the replies very well or whatever. If you do the math, all of a sudden it's like 40, okay, that's 80%. Oh, that's a really low B I got on that. It feels much worse than, well, just like you're 5 points away from an A, and that's 5 out of, again, 1,000. So it's good to keep the points in perspective as actual points, as those raw points, not always doing those calculations in your head. Okay. But once we move away then from our introductions unit, we get a little bit closer to more of the content stuff for our course, which is really going to unfold in units 3 and 4 and as we get going. So our main focus is obviously writing. We're in a composition course. But what we're reading or what we're writing about is so-called literature. It's kind of one of my least favorite words, even though that's like what my job is. It just has so much baggage. It sounds so formal and kind of intimidating and not very friendly. I don't know. It just has, lots that it's dragging around with it. But that's actually where we're going to start. So this Unit 2, has us doing some plagiarism stuff. I'll tell you right now, if you plagiarize, I'll catch it. You get an F. It's just the worst possible scenario. If you argue about it, I'll point us back to this video, so let's not even talk so much about that. Plagiarism is clearly when you just, you know, Google something and cut and paste it, or you just alter a couple of the words, and it's certainly not your work and you don't cite it or ascribe it to anybody else. It's really easy to catch. I mean, I know it's easy to find stuff on Death of a Salesman or whatever, you know, essays we're going to write in the future. But for as easy as that stuff is to find on the student side, it's just as easy on the professor side. So it's just a bad choice, and I don't even like to talk about it so much, as though I'm sort of harping on it already. But Unit 2 kind of lays that groundwork, so we really don't have to think about it so much anymore. And then we get into a discussion board here that is based on this very brief reading that kind of asks the question, what is literature? So we're not really talking about like the composition part of our course just yet, but we're trying to wrap our heads around very generally what kinds of things do we think about when we think about literature, since that's what we'll be reading in order to have something to write about. So I like this as a place to start. It doesn't really talk about like how do we write this essay just yet, or this paragraph or discussion board. It's more about kind of the idea that we'll be getting into. And then again, notice that there's respond to 2, so make sure you take care of that part of it. And then always be checking for those due dates. So Unit 2 around the corner after the weekend on Monday, and then we get right into Unit 3, which really is more of the composition stuff in our course. In fact, I'll pop into that really briefly here just to give you a little heads up. So Unit 3 is organized by a separate folder, since I didn't want just tons of stuff on this kind of front page here. So make sure you work through all of the individual pieces in order. They're kind of set up this way. The second folder has us looking at MLA citation, which will be a major part of our course. Sometimes 1102 is called the research course, so a big part of that research is going to be, you know, citing sources properly, building a works cited page. But that first folder is really like maybe one of the most important kind of fundamental concepts that we're going to learn as part of our composition class, and it has to do with managing the general and the specific. In other words, how do you have an intro that leads to a thesis, the body of your essay that develops topic sentences and direct quotation and all that kind of stuff. So there's a video that I've produced here within the unit that I'm going to have you watch, and then I kind of like spell it out here again in text and some visual stuff. There's examples. So I reiterate the point in lots of different ways. I really like the stick figure guy. Intentionally, because the idea here is really so foundational and so fundamental. It is like one of the main things I'll be looking for in your essays when we finally get to those major writing assignments. And then the assignment for the unit, then you'll find, again by going back into this final folder, it's like a micro writing assignment. So for Unit 3, you'll be doing reading a story called Flight Patterns from our book. There's a brief quiz that's kind of make sure you do the reading, but I'm not so big on quizzes. It's really more to maybe direct your attention to some of the more important parts of what's going on in that story. So obviously do it, but you know, I don't like just quizzing people to death. It's not very fun. We're really more concerned with this paragraph assignment. And remember, like I've said before, the whole point here of the paragraph assignment, or the assessment device here, is for you to show me that you've learned the concept from Unit 3, which is that stick figure thing. So obviously you don't want to skip all that folder material and then just jump into the paragraph, because that would be like, you know, not, I don't know, showing up to class in your history class and then trying to do the test without having learned the other stuff. It doesn't make any sense, so you wouldn't do it here. And it's a very, very brief paragraph. It's really like stripped down to the bare bones of what we're trying to accomplish in what might be like a typical body paragraph in an essay. Okay, so as always, you really got to take your time and kind of move through the material. Be conscious of when and where those due dates are falling. So we get, starting next week, we really get into more of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday regular schedule. You'll notice that we kind of jam things up a little bit earlier here, moving pretty quickly, in order that we have a little bit more time as we get towards our essay assignments. So always be conscious of how those due dates play out, not just the one that's right around the corner, but a little bit further down the road too. There hardly is a further down the road in the 5-week format, but I think you know what I mean. Okay, so hope everyone is feeling confident and situated in the course and knows what's going on. And as always, if you have questions or concerns, be in touch with me.